unleashed the basic constructive forces of the free market. And from 1983 on, it's been almost entirely up.
Far away in the South Atlantic, a British expeditionary force was at sea. Argentina had seized the Falkland Islands from Britain. Margaret Thatcher risked a war to make the islands British once again.
6-8 now, 16 now, set!
Before the war, her popularity was at rock bottom. Victory in the Falklands ensured the survival of Margaret Thatcher's government.
The Falklands saved her. The Falklands gave her a new lease of life to implement the policies on which she had embarked, which were not yet producing results. In effect, she gambled all on the Falklands, and she won decisively. And that, of course, not only greatly bolstered her standing within the Tory party, bolstered her standing in the country, and it greatly enhanced her reputation internationally.
The Falklands War set her up politically to fight the final battle for the soul of the British economy. The impact would be worldwide. In 1945, Attlee's Labour government had nationalised the commanding heights of the economy, bringing core industries into state ownership. For Thatcherites, these state industries were now the primary target.
A whole lot of people who were left of centre thought that nationalisation was Britain's great gift to the world. And one of my phrases at the time was that having exported the disaster of nationalisation to the world, Britain should offer them the antidote. It was the decent thing to do, to say, we're very sorry, it didn't work.
So the whole efficiency of nationalised industries was running down. Why should they be efficient? They had access to the treasury purse.
Thatcher wanted to end their dependence on government subsidies and submit them to the discipline of the marketplace.
The nationalised industries fell to pieces. They lost huge sums of money. They put the prices up massively and still weren't able to make a profit. They were bleeding the nation dry, the taxpayer dry, and they weren't doing a good job for their customers.
The coal mines and the miners' union became Thatcher's biggest challenge.
The coal miners represented the last bastion of the socialist mindset in the UK. One of the most singularly important economic/political events for the world economic system was Margaret Thatcher's government's confrontation with the coal miners.
We were quite clear, uneconomic pits must close. You could not go on pouring money into uneconomic pits. It was taxpayers' money.
If you look at our coal industry, the coal is very deep in the earth. It is hugely expensive to get out.
75% of Britain's coal mines were losing money. It took government subsidies of nearly £2 billion a year to keep them going. But these statistics were seen as irrelevant by men like Ken Capstick, one of the radical socialists who led the miners' union.
What they would say was that in America, for instance, coal produced at the pit head was cheaper than coal produced at the pit head here.
The union leaders argued that the government subsidies were money well spent if they kept 180,000 miners at work and able to feed their families.
The miners used to say, and I can remember them saying it, while ever I've got these, I'll always have a job.
It was a historic grudge match. Both sides knew the miners had brought down Ted Heath's Conservative government 10 years earlier. The fiery Marxist who led the National Union of Miners said no mine should be closed until the coal ran out.
To declare official, in accordance with Rule 41, the strike action is now.
The issue before our members is very clear. They either accept the policies of the coal board and the government, which will result in the loss of 70,000 jobs, or alternatively they stand on their feet like men, they fight, defend their jobs, defend their pits and defend their dignity.
The strike was an epic clash of values which symbolized the wider battle of ideas. Socialist against capitalist, free market against state ownership. And it was a question of power. Who ruled Britain? Illegal mass picketing outside working mines led to violent clashes with the police.
It was the next thing to a war. We were faced with an enemy, and that enemy was out to destroy our livelihoods, out to destroy our pits, out to destroy our communities and what our communities stood for. Miners and their families had a set of values that I don't think Margaret Thatcher could understand. Values of socialism and Christianity. The two things went hand in hand in many ways.
For more than a year, the miners held out, until internal rifts and the desire of many to return to work brought the walkout to an end.
And then, suddenly, the collapse, the strike, and the most powerful union, with the most militant leader, had failed.
Britain has changed. Today, less than 3,000 work in the mines.
I feel devastated by what I see. Grimethorpe had considerable reserves of coal when it was closed. Plenty of work for those miners to continue to do, to keep their families. You can see the wastelands. You can see the social deprivation that it caused. The children that are coming along, no prospects, no future. People despairing because they can't find employment and the dignity that employment brings. It's market forces gone mad.
The political consequences of the failure of the strike were incalculable.
The coal mining strike of the early 1980s was a tragedy for so many of the mining families that were involved in it.
Perhaps the greatest political impact was on the Labour Party, that had all along opposed Thatcher's free market policies.
I came into politics as someone who lived in an area which was an old mining community. The problem for the left in the past was they equated the public interest with public ownership and public regulation, and therefore they assumed that markets were not therefore in the public interest. What we have had to explain both to ourselves and to the country, and now I believe it's possible to explain this to the rest of the world as well, is that markets are in the public interest.
One of the most important things that the government of Margaret Thatcher does is invent this thing called privatization. That is taking these state-owned companies, these nationalized industries, and selling shares to the public.
One by one, the Thatcher government put the commanding heights of the British economy up for sale. Electricity, telephones, oil, gas, coal, steel, trains and planes, even water. Before long, 2/3 of the state-owned industries were removed from government control and sold off into the private sector. Who should control the commanding heights, governments or markets? In Britain, that battle was over.
What Margaret Thatcher did in Britain and the principles that she introduced were imitated worldwide. Asia, Latin America, even in Africa, and to some degree in the Middle East.
The tide had surely swung. The thinkers that had kept alive the ideas of markets did play their role at that moment.
In his lifetime, Hayek saw fascism rise and fall, communism come and go, and the end of his years in the intellectual wilderness.
Here was a man who had intellectually changed the world without ever really leaving the university. It was the power of his books, the power of his ideas, as then captured by Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher, that had changed things.
The coincidence of Thatcher and Reagan having been in office at the same time was enormously important for the public acceptance worldwide of a different approach to economic and monetary policy.
The old debates were about what the role of the market was, what was the role of the state. I think it's now generally appreciated that it's the market that harnesses people's initiative best. And the real focus in progressive thinking now is not how to oppose and suppress market forces, but how to use market forces to achieve progressive objectives.
If you look at the whole of the 20th century, there's been a huge cycle. Less government was the orthodoxy at the beginning of the 20th century. More government clearly was the orthodoxy for the middle part of the 20th century. And now the later part, going into the new millennium, we're back to where we were practically at the start of the century. And you have to give folks like Hayek and Friedman, and then later Reagan and Thatcher, their due for pushing all of this along.
I remember the foreign minister and finance minister from another country saying to me, "You're the first prime minister who's ever tried to roll back the frontiers of socialism. We want to know what's going to happen, because if you succeed, others will follow."
Within 10 years, governments everywhere would retreat from the commanding heights of their economies. In the battle of ideas, the pendulum had swung from government to market, from Keynes to Hayek. Only time would tell what people would ask of their governments in the event of corporate scandals, a market crash, a world recession, or a war.
Lech Wałęsa offers insights into the agony of reform.